Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti. I am MrPhotographer.com. In this video, I'm going to compare the features of On1 Photo RAW 2020 to Lightroom Classic. This is actually part of a short series of videos I'm doing where I'm comparing different software applications to Lightroom. Yesterday, I compared Luminar 4 to Lightroom. If you haven't seen that video, in the description below this video, I'll have a link to it. If you're watching this video on YouTube, a little flag will pop up over in the top right-hand corner with a link to that video, and I'll also have it linked at the end of this video. Now, in future videos, I'll compare both Exposure X5 and Capture One to Lightroom Classic. Why am I comparing these videos, or these applications, to Lightroom Classic? Well, for better or worse, Lightroom Classic is really the king of the hill. They still have the largest market share in post-processing software, and everyone is trying to get a piece of that pie. So I'm comparing everything to Lightroom. Plus, I know many of you use Lightroom. You don't care for Adobe subscription model, so you're looking for something that you could just purchase as a standalone product. So, as I mentioned, we're talking about On1 Photo RAW 2020 today. And I think this video is going to be shorter than yesterday's because On1 Photo RAW 2020 is more similar to Lightroom than probably just about any other application. And because it's more similar, there's less to discuss. When there's differences, you have to discuss the differences, and the videos tend to take longer. Now, let's just start out at the beginning, importing images. As mentioned in yesterday's video, and I'm sorry I'm going to be repeating myself a lot about Lightroom that when I talked about in yesterday's Luminar video. In Lightroom, you just can't navigate to where images are on your computer and start working on them. You have to go through a formal import process. And the import process can be confusing, sometimes considered a little bit convoluted, but it's very powerful. You could do a lot. You could edit metadata. You could add your copyright information, add keywords. You could add a second copy of that image to another location on your computer. You could add it to a collection as you're going. We'll talk about collections in a minute. You could just control where it goes. So it's very powerful import function, but you have to import it. You just can't, again, navigate to wherever the images are on your computer and start working on them. On one, you could do that. You could just navigate to wherever they are and just start working on your images. But if you do have images on a device, a camera, memory card, something like that, you can import them into On1 Photo RAW 2020, and their import dialog is similar to Lightroom's. So you go up to File, Import from Device, and you can see when their import dialog comes up, you could specify where you're putting them. You could do a backup. You could back up your images to another location, so make a second copy basically. You could rename your images as you import them, similar. You could do all that in Lightroom. Metadata, add your copyright information, add keywords, all that you could do in Lightroom. You could give them star ratings and color labels as you import them as well. You could do a develop preset. You could do that in Lightroom as well. And you could even edit the capture time here in On1 Photo RAW 2020's import module. So importing in On1 is pretty much identical to importing in Lightroom, unlike Luminar, which Luminar's import module is very rudimentary and there was no metadata edits available or keywording or anything like that. So On1, again, more similar to Lightroom. Now, even if you just navigate to where your images are on your computer, sometimes you're at a disadvantage when you do that, because when you import images into On1 or you import images into Lightroom, they catalog those images. And when they're cataloged, they're also creating previews of the images, and it allows you to browse them faster. They render quicker on your computer, and they're found in searches quicker because they're cataloged. If you navigate to images on your computer in On1, you have the option of cataloging that folder. So again, in Lightroom, you have to import and they get cataloged as you import. But in On1, you can navigate to where they are. And if you want to catalog that folder, so the images, so you create previews and the images render faster and so on, you could just go to the folder, right click, and go to Make Cataloged Folder, and then it will tell you cataloging a folder enables searching, viewing subfolder contents, and auto-tracking of changes in the folder. It will also cache previews for viewing photos instantly. It can take time, but is done in the background. And then you have the choice of what size preview you want to create. So you have the option then of just navigating to where the images are on your computer and cataloging the folder that those images are in. So it's kind of like importing them in a way, but it allows it then to take advantage of those features that was mentioned in that pop-up. And then when you catalog a folder over here on the left, you could see that my catalog folders will be right there. Now, again, you have on the left-hand panel when you're in the Browse module, and this is something digital asset management. In Lightroom, of course, we have the Library module. In On1 Photo RAW 2020, it's called the Browse module. And again, it's very similar to Lightroom. It has most of all the same features. On the left-hand side, you have your folders. You can navigate to wherever your images are. You could give your images star ratings, color labels. You could give them pick flags, although in On1 they're not flags, they're hearts. So you're favoriting an image or you're rejecting the image. And again, in Lightroom, all that is done in Lightroom as well, except they're flags in Lightroom. You have advanced search capabilities. That was one of the things I bemoaned about Luminar, that you really couldn't search. So like in Lightroom, if you go to grid view at the top, you could see you could search for specific cameras, specific lenses, any text field that is in the metadata, you could search for that. You could search by attribute, you know, the star rating, color label, the flag status, and so on. So that's kind of an advanced search technique or advanced search function. It's available in Lightroom. All that is available in On1 as well. You can see down here in search, you could search for your liked photos. It has kind of like these preset searches, or you could just do it yourself here. So flag status or the heart status, the number of stars, the color labels. You also could go down to advanced, and right here where it says everything, click there, and you could search by camera. I think you could search by lens as well. We have lens. So all these different categories you could search by. So all the search features that are available in Lightroom are available here as well. And just going down a little further, it has tethered shooting. Of course, Lightroom has tethered shooting. I've never used the tethered shooting in On1 Photo RAW 2020, so I don't know how good it is. If anyone has used it and you'd like to comment below how effective or how well it works, I think all of us would be grateful if you would do that. Also, if I make a mistake or misrepresent anything, because it's kind of hard to keep all these different software applications in my brain like straight and fresh, if I make a mistake, misrepresent anything, please feel free to correct me in the description or in the comments below this video. All right, so the Browse module is pretty similar to Lightroom's Browse module. Also, unlike Luminar, yes, you're able to edit metadata. You could put in your copyright information. You could edit, add keywords. You can't do that in Luminar. You could do all that in On1 Photo RAW 2020, and you could do it in Lightroom. So those Browse and Library features are very similar in the two applications. Now, as far as processing your engine or processing your images, the processing engines in both applications are very similar. They'll process images in very similar ways, but then again, I think every application nowadays is like that. Now, in Lightroom, you have the Develop module. That's where you process your images. And I mentioned in that Luminar video that I consider the Develop module in Lightroom to be just basic processing. You're processing tone, color, and you're doing some effects like vignetting and grain and things like that. You do have some transform controls. So if you're doing cityscapes or real estate photography, you can make sure your verticals are vertical and your horizontals are horizontal and your corners are square. So that all is available here, and you could do noise reduction and sharpening all in this Develop module of Lightroom. And in my opinion, that's like the bare minimum that should be done to process an image. And that's what Lightroom has, the bare minimum. The Develop module in On1 Photo RAW 2020 is in the Edit panel. And again, it has that basic functionality. It has tone and color, and it has sharpening and noise reduction. It has lens corrections, same as Lightroom, and it has the transform tab as well. So you could, do those transform adjustments. Now, beyond this, though, beyond this basic develop processing, On1 Photo RAW also has an effects module. And in the effects module, you could add a number of different filters to your image. Some of the filters cover some of the basic operation that's in Lightroom. For instance, the effects module here to put a vignette on, you'd have to go to the effects module of On1 Photo RAW 2020 to add the vignette. It's not in the develop module, but still it's there. But there's a lot more as well, and there's a lot of creative options here. You could see you have a number of different filters you could choose from, and you could do creative things like textures and sun flares. Split toning is something that's in the develop module of Lightroom. It's in the effects module of On1 Photo RAW 2020. Color enhancer, color process, color balance, some of these color mixer. These are things that are in Photoshop that aren't found in Lightroom. So you have borders, bleach bypass. So a lot more creative things here. You could affect weather, add snow, add rain to an image, stuff like that. So a lot of things here, lots. I didn't mention that in yesterday's video, but Luminar also allows you to use a 3D LUT. You could do that in On1 Photo RAW 2020 as well. You cannot do that in Lightroom. So LUTs are not available in Lightroom. So that when you add the develop module of On1 Photo RAW 2020 with the effects module of On1 Photo RAW 2020, you have way more than what's available in Lightroom. Now, Lightroom is meant to be used as a companion to Photoshop, and a lot of these things like color balance and filters and things like that, photo filters and textures, you would do in Photoshop. But many people don't use Photoshop; they just use Lightroom. So with On1 Photo RAW 2020, you get all the develop module things that Lightroom has. Every single thing is in here, and more with the effects module. Now, jumping back to the develop module again, I want to go to tone and color and talk about camera profiles. You can see that they're available in On1 Photo RAW 2020, and there's an import function. And I mentioned in yesterday's video that I thought one of the things that Luminar was lacking is it didn't give you the option to import a camera profile. Most often, and I'll repeat myself from yesterday's video, many photographers use what's called an X-Rite color checker. Could be a passport or standard. It's just a little grid of colors that you would put in a scene that you've lit, usually artificially, all right? So you put this color checker in the scene and take a reference photo. Then you take that reference photo and use the software that comes with the color checker to really nail the colors, get the colors absolutely correct, and it will create a profile when it does it. Then with Lightroom, you could load that profile into Lightroom, and then you could make sure that every image you take with that lighting that you've done in that scene, the color will be exact. And that is important because many times photographers need to have the color exact, most notably product photographers. And as mentioned yesterday, if you're doing an ad campaign for Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola red has to be exact. It can't be approximately the same color as Coca-Cola red. It has to be exact. IBM blue has to be the exact hue of blue. So it's very important to many photographers, fashion photographers. They have to get the colors exactly right. And with On1 Photo RAW 2020, you could do that. And with Lightroom, you could do that. Unfortunately, with Luminar, you cannot do that, at least not as of yet. So that is another advantage. Another similarity to Lightroom is lens corrections. You could see that they'll get applied automatically, but they're not necessarily automatic like Luminar is. Luminar will just read the data from the RAW file and automatically apply the correct lens profile to create for any lens distortions. Lightroom and On1 will do the same thing, but where Lightroom and On1 supersede or go past Luminar is they'll allow you to manually do it. The advantage of manually doing it is that if you're using a lens that isn't electronic, an older lens, a manual focus lens, there's no way for that lens to communicate to the camera to tell it what it is. So that data won't be written to the RAW file. With Luminar and On1, you could just drill down, put the make of the lens, and then drill down to the actual lens, and you could just put it in there and it will do the corrections. With Luminar, that option isn't there. There's no menus. It just automatically will do it or automatically won't do it. So that, again, is another similarity between On1 Photo RAW 2020 and Lightroom Classic. So we talked about effects. Let's go to effects a little bit more and talk about what really is missing in Lightroom, and that is layers and layer masks. Again, Lightroom is meant to be used as a companion to Photoshop, and all that is available in Photoshop. All that is available in On1 Photo RAW 2020, and you have actually two different types of layers and layer masks. Well, you have one type of layer, but you have two different types of layer masks. Let's talk about the masks first. You actually have what's called filter mask, and you can see that in the effects module on this image I happen to have added 4 filters. And if I go to the tone enhancer, you can see I just apparently just moved highlights down on this. And if you go right here where the mask is, with the mask I'll be able then to use the brush up here at the top and paint away the adjustment wherever I don't want it, or the option of painting it in where I want it. You also could use it as a luminosity mask. So just click there and it just automatically becomes a luminosity mask. I'm going to undo that. You could reset the mask. You could actually view the mask. Now the mask is white. If I hit the luminosity mask, you can see how it looks now. And I'll just reset it and turn off view. So you have a lot of mask options here. So you could brush in or out the effect wherever you want it. You could feather the mask. It has a color range, so you could use this to just have the tone enhancer affect a range of colors as opposed to the entire image. Also, if you click on this little gear right here, you'll have a full array of blending options. So blending modes that are in Photoshop are all available here. Again, none of this is available in Lightroom, none at all. So you have a lot of different masking options. Now at the top you could see we have layers. So you actually could do layers like you would do in Photoshop as well. You would click the little plus sign here and a little dialog box will pop up telling you that you're creating a layered photo. It's just telling you that it's non-destructive and what On1 does to make it non-destructive there. So you could create another layer and you could do adjustments just on that layer, and each layer has a mask. So you could mask those adjustments into or out of certain areas of the photo. So layers and masking are available in On1 Photo RAW 2020. They're not available in Lightroom, except in the local adjustment tools. There's some rudimentary masking. For instance, the brush, the radial filter, and the graduated filter. At the bottom, you could see range mask is there. It's just off now because I didn't use a brush or anything on this image. But if I did, let's say, take a brush and I do that, let's say, all of a sudden this becomes active, and I could do a color mask, a luminance mask, and if you're taking an image that has depth information saved to the RAW file, that depth would be there as well. So you could do then some rudimentary masking with the local adjustment tools in Lightroom, but that's actually a far cry from what is available in Photoshop as far as masks are concerned. Now, carrying on about local adjustments tools, if you are in the edit panel of On1 Photo RAW 2020, in the far right you have the local module. When you click on that, you have the choice of using a brush or a graduated filter. So you could put a graduated filter on the image. You have all the controls here. Kind of similar. There looks like there's a little more over here in Lightroom. Let's see, like texture clarity. There's no texture clarity, but we do have structure, which is similar to clarity here, and all these controls. So you could use the brush tools or graduated filter up here. As far as I know, there is not any radial filter in On1 Photo RAW 2020. Carrying on with tools in Lightroom, you also have a red eye removal tool. There is not a red eye removal tool in On1. You have a spot removal tool. In On1, you have this retouch eraser. They call it the perfect eraser. So that, you could do that to remove blemishes or remove dust spots or sensor spots or anything like that with that retouch eraser, perfect eraser. And we have the crop tool in Lightroom, and there's crop tool available in On1 Photo RAW as well. And you can see the transform tools over there as well. You also could add text to an image with the text tool in On1. There's no text tool here, although you could add text like in the print module in the slideshow. You could add text as well. The book module you could add text to, but not. You can't just put it anywhere. I have actually videos that cover all that. If you ever want to, just email me and I'll point you in the right direction where those videos are. I have well over 1,000 videos on YouTube, so I'll find them for you. Now, so we have these local adjustments as well. Now, you'll also notice that there's a portrait tab as well. Now, obviously, there's not a person in this image, but what would happen was, let's go back to grid view. Let me see if I could quickly, like here. We'll go here. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so we're going to go to the portrait tab here. And you can see I already did some portrait retouching to this. With the portrait tab, unlike Luminar, which Luminar uses artificial intelligence, and it knows where the eyes are, knows where the lips and teeth are, knows where the face is. On1 just knows where the face is, pretty much. And then you'd have to click on the eye tool and put these overlays on the eyes, and you could see them. Then you adjust the overlay so it covers the eye properly. You click on the lips tool, and then it puts an overlay on the lips, and you put the overlay on there so it could know where the upper lip, lower lip, and the teeth are. And then you would use the controls to whiten teeth, add some redness to the lips, whiten the eyes, add some color to the irises, and so on. So you would do that with these tools, these overlay tools. So they're not automatic like Luminar is, but they are very effective. You just have to manually do it. So that portrait tools are available here. There really isn't an option, obviously, in Photoshop for that. Now there is in the brush. If you go to the drop down, now I have my own brushes in here, but there is iris enhance and soften skin. So you could use the brush tool in Lightroom to do some of those things, but they're not as effective. And you could make the argument that the softening skin, you're just blurring the skin in Lightroom, where here you're doing a more a higher level skin softening than just blurring skin. So portrait tools are another advantage of On1 Photo RAW 2020. So once you get your images, one thing too, real quick, is soft proofing is available in On1 Photo RAW 2020. Let's see, I think if you go to, I think it's under View. Yeah, enable soft proofing, and that is available, and it is available in Lightroom Classic as well. And you could load profiles, import a color profile. So you could load the profile for your paper, your printer, and then you'll get like an overlay on here, and it will show you what's out of gamut. So what isn't going to print properly for the printer and paper you're using. So you could change the paper, use a different profile, and maybe change the printer, use a different profile, or you could reprocess your image so the colors will come into gamut, so it will print properly. So again, all that is available in On1 Photo RAW 2020, and it's also available in Lightroom. So that isn't available in Luminar. So I just thought I'd mention that. Now, once you actually process an image and you just want to export the image, the export module is down here in the lower right, and it is more feature-rich than Luminar's export module, and more akin to what Lightroom is. Unfortunately, it is kind of slow. You can see I clicked on it and it still says progress loading. It took a while to come up. Unlike Lightroom's export module, I could hit on my Mac Shift Command E and it comes up pretty quickly. And it has, in Lightroom's version, I could say where it's going. I could rename the file. I could choose between JPEG, PSD, TIFF, PNG, DNG, or the original. In JPEG, of course, you have a quality slider. You have color spaces, those 4 listed, or you could pick a different color space, load it. You could resize the image. You could apply some output sharpening. You have control over metadata, what metadata is sent with your export. You could watermark. Watermarking is built in to Lightroom. It's not built into Luminar. I showed a hack of how you could watermark with Luminar. And what are you going to do after export? Show it in Finder, go into Photoshop, and so on. So all that is available here. And just to reference back to Luminar's export module, again, it was real rudimentary. You basically just picked where you wanted to put the file, what type of file type you were exporting to. You could do some export sharpening and color space, and that was pretty much it. With On1 Photo RAW 2020, you have a lot more control, and it's more akin to what Lightroom Classic does. You have photo size. You could add the watermark. Watermarking is built into On1 Photo RAW 2020. Output sharpening. It now does a couple things that are available in the print module of Lightroom. That is tiling and gallery wrap. So tiling is if you're making a tile of images. So you're making a huge display of a photo, but you don't have a printer that could print that image that big, so you tile it. And you could control your tiling here. Gallery wraps, this is most often for a canvas prints that get mounted on wood frames, and you would have all the controls here to, the size of the wood frame and all the thickness, and you could do that all here. And again, that is something you would do in the print module of Lightroom. File type, here you have JPEG, Photoshop, Photoshop large document, TIFF, and PNG. And again, you have the quality slider for JPEG. For color spaces, you have Adobe, Apple, Color Match, Camera, Calibration Space, ProPhoto RGB, sRGB, and you could import a color profile. Where are you going to put it? And you could rename it. So it's pretty similar to the export dialog in Lightroom Classic, and a lot more advanced than Luminar. Luminar, again, is very rudimentary. Now, the bad thing about it, in my opinion, is it takes a long time. So when you export an image, like if I export this image and I just bring up the export dialog box again, and I'll just call it statue. All right. And I'll hit export. Within 5 seconds, this will export, like 1001, 1002, 1003, there. It exported already. I'm not going to demo it here because it will take a minute. It takes a long time to export an image from On1 Photo RAW 2020. That's something I wish they'd improve, because a lot of times you're doing bulk exporting. You're exporting more than one image. And really, it takes so long that you just go out for lunch and then come back and hopefully it's done. So to export an image will take 30 seconds to a minute, usually in On1 Photo RAW 2020. So to me, that's an issue, but hopefully they fix it. Now, just to clean up a little bit more about stuff I didn't mention necessarily, if you click on this little thing here, I have it closed. There are presets available for On1 Photo RAW 2020. They comes with a bunch. Many people like me sell presets for On1 Photo RAW 2020 as well. So you could buy aftermarket presets, install them into On1, just like you can in Lightroom. They're not compatible with Lightroom presets, though. Totally different format. So they do have presets available. It has a lot of different tools over here on the left that will allow you to very relatively easily do things like replace a sky. Not as easy as Luminar. Luminar is pretty much one click, right? Here you have to tell it where the sky is, and then it will hopefully replace the sky properly in that area. And then you might have to clean it up a little bit. So it's a little harder to do, but easier than Photoshop. So it's easier than Photoshop, but harder than Luminar. Considerably harder than Luminar. But considerably easier than Photoshop, if that made any sense. So it's more or less right in the middle. And I'm sure I'm probably forgetting something. Oh, you know what I forgot about yesterday? If you go in the Browse module, Browse panel of On1 Photo RAW 2020, you could see that you have panoramas, HDR, and focus stacking available that isn't at all available in Luminar. So there's no panorama function, HDR function, or focus stacking in Luminar. But in Lightroom, there is panoramas and HDR. So you could do that in Lightroom, but you cannot do focus stacking. And the reason why they're grayed out now is I just have to select more than one image, and then you'll see that it has panorama, HDR, and focus stacking available. So that's pretty cool. Features that are available in On1. And as I mentioned, On1 Photo RAW 2020 is more similar to Lightroom than probably any of the other applications we're going to be talking about. But in some things it does, better, and some things it doesn't do as well. Like the exporting function takes a long time, kind of slow. That's my pet peeve with it. So if I missed anything or misrepresented anything, feel free to comment below and correct me, or add things that you like about On1 or things you don't like about On1, and mention them before. I'd be interested in hearing them. And maybe in the future, when I do videos, maybe comparing On1 Photo RAW 2021 to whatever they're calling Lightroom in a year or two, then I'll know what to cover in those videos. So I do appreciate everyone's comments. Even though I may not comment back, I do read just about all of them, even the nasty ones. And although I gotta say, most often you guys are super nice to me, and I really do appreciate it. And I really do appreciate everyone that watches my videos. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you guys soon.